While many horror movies make it clear that they've got the makings of a franchise from the outset, others don't really leave the door open at all. But that won't necessarily stop studios and filmmakers from trying to make gory fetch happen regardless. Because if there's money to be made, a horror sequel is surely going to happen eventually. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and these are 10 upcoming horror sequels nobody expected. Number 10, Crawl 2. 2019's creature feature Crawl fared well with critics and grossed an impressive $91 million against a mere $15 million budget. But given the rather singular nature of its premise, focused on a father and daughter who fend off alligators in the middle of a hurricane, did anyone expect to see a sequel? Furthermore, as solidly regarded as the movie is, it's hardly had much cultural staying power over the last 6 years. That is to say, there hasn't been much sustained online chatter about it since it came out. If a Crawl sequel was going to happen to capitalise on the original's success, then it probably should have been made within 2 or 3 years of its release. And yet, after years of director Alexander Aja teasing a potential sequel, Crawl 2 was finally confirmed last August, with Aja returning to helm a script by Andrew Deutschman and Jason Pagan. If you were wondering how a similarly torrid situation could befall the same people twice without it seeming totally ridiculous, Aja has instead conceived Crawl 2 as a standalone sequel focused on a new cast who face off against a fleet of animals that escape from New York's Central Park Zoo during a storm. While Paramount would have probably loved to see Kaya Scodelario back in the lead role given the first film's success, it would have been straining credibility to near snapping point to have her protagonist fighting for her life yet again. At least with Aja directing once more, Crawl 2 should deliver another round of nail-biting, white-knuckle thrills. Number 9, Black Sheep 2. Now there's one hell of a deep cut. 2006's New Zealand comedy horror Black Sheep delivered exactly what it promised on the tin. A riotous romp in which an experiment gone wrong unleashes zombified sheep upon the unsuspecting residents of a local farm. It didn't take itself one iota too seriously, while serving up a winning combo of plentiful gore, gut-busting laughs, and wild practical creature effects. Yet despite scoring positive reviews from critics, it only grossed roughly $5 million worldwide, most of it in the UK and Australia. So Black Sheep seemed like a perfect one-off, a charming cult classic that many horror fans went on to discover on home video. Apparently enough that late last year, Black Sheep 2 was confirmed to be in development. Original writer-director Jonathan King will return to tackle this 2 decades later follow-up, while original lead Nathan Meister is also set to reprise his role of Henry Oldfield. But perhaps best of all, Weta Workshop is back once again to provide the film's wild practical effects. Production is currently set to begin this coming spring, so we'll likely have a release in 2026. Number 8, They Follow. It Follows was one of the most unexpected indie horror hits of the 2010s, grossing a superb $23.3 million against a mere $1.3 million budget, and maintaining popularity over the last decade thanks to its tantalizing premise, unique atmosphere, and Micah Monroe's terrific central performance. Shortly after the film's 2015 release, distributor Radius TWC talked up the prospect of a sequel, though word went quiet enough in the years that followed that it seemed like filmmaker David Robert Mitchell had categorically moved on. But in late 2023, it was confirmed that Mitchell and Monroe would be reuniting for the long-gestating follow-up, They Follow, which is set to start shooting later this year. Though plot specifics are firmly under wraps, it was previously hinted that the sequel could see Monroe's protagonist Jay going back down the curse's chain to seek out it. Either way, Monroe, who has read the sequel script, called it, quote, bigger and darker and more effed up. Much as many belated horror sequels feel like they've missed the boat before shooting has even started, They Follow is absolutely a movie that horror fans are still desperately clamoring for. Number 7, Circles. Released the very same year as It Follows, but on the entirely opposite end of the genre spectrum now, we have Circle, a sci-fi horror film in which 50 people wake up in a dark room and must vote to kill a member of the group every 2 minutes until only one person remains. Circle premiered at the Seattle International Film Festival in 2015 before ultimately being acquired by Netflix. And though it scored mixed reviews from critics, it's endured as a popular fixture on the streaming platform over the years. Last last year, it was unexpectedly confirmed that a sequel, Circles, has been greenlit, fully financed, and is imminently due to enter production. Devon Gray will pen the script, though it's still unclear whether original directors Aaron Hahn and Mario Missioni will return to direct. As for the premise, Circles will take place 17 years after the first film, focusing on the survivors of Earth's alien invasion as they face off against a new threat. Dun dun dun! Number 6, Ready or Not 2. Ready or Not was a deliriously entertaining horror comedy released in 2019, albeit one whose premise simply didn't seem repeatable, at least not with the same protagonist, Samara Weaving's Grace. However, the film's box office success, netting a cool $57.6 million against a tight $6 million budget, resulted in a sequel being unexpectedly announced in early 2024. Later in the year, Weaving was also confirmed to be reprising her role from the first picture, with directors Radio Silence also locked in to helm once again. As winning as this pairing clearly is, the directors face the unenviable task of persuading the audience that such a wildly specific scenario could happen to the same person twice. Unless, of course, Ready or Not 2 ends up being something totally unexpected. While some were hopeful that Ready or Not would spawn a series of standalone sequels focused on different games, it's tough to blame the studio or the filmmakers for wanting Weaving back, as tricky a sequel as this might be to get right. Well, here's hoping that they pull it off. Number 5, Trash's Revenge. 1985's legendary cult classic The Return of the Living Dead has spawned 4 sequels to date, all of which have been largely panned by both critics and fans of the original. But in addition to a franchise reboot recently being announced, Linnea Quigley, who unforgettably played Trash in the original film, confirmed last year that a direct sequel to the original was also being developed called Trash's Revenge. Even though Trash died in Return of the Living Dead, this 4 decades later sequel will inexplicably resurrect her for a sequel that, according to the film's crowdfunding page, will also contain meta-elements in which Quigley portrays a not-so-fictionalized version of herself. It was later confirmed that Quigley will be joined by original co-stars Beverly Randolph, Tom Matthews, Miguel Nunez, and John Philbin, and somewhat contentiously, late actors James Karen and Don Calfer will be included in the film with the help of CGI tech. It's certainly not a sequel anyone expected to see so long after the fact, though given that the crowdfunding drive has gotten off to a very slow start, it does remain to be seen if Trash's Revenge will ever actually see the light of day. Number 4, Spookies II, Spookier. Hands up if anyone ever expected 1986's cult classic Spookies, in which a warlock unleashes various monsters upon a group of human sacrifices in order to save his ailing wife, to get a sequel. Nope. Nobody? Well, between the film's atrocious box office and how scarcely it's been available on home video until recently, it just didn't seem like enough people cared about Spookies for it to ever become a franchise in its own right. But last October, the hilariously monikered Spookies II, Spookier, was confirmed by the first film's co-writer Frank Farrell. Farrell revealed that original Spookies director Thomas Doran penned a treatment for the sequel prior to his death in 2016, and Spookies 4K restoration in 2019 also helped rejuvenate interest in a new movie. Better yet, Farrell has a draft of the script completed, and though there's no word yet on when Spookies 2 might start shooting, Farrell has already recruited veteran special effects artists Gabriel Bartalos and Vincent J. Guastini, so that's a start at least. Number 3, Isn't It Scary? If you're wondering why a 2019 Rebel Wilson starring rom-com made it onto a horror list, well, buckle in and allow me to explain. Isn't It Romantic starred Wilson as Natalie, a woman who finds herself trapped inside a world that adheres to the cliches and conventions of a typical PG-13 romantic comedy movie. It wasn't an amazing film, but it had some solid laughs courtesy of its fun concept, yet between its mediocre box office performance and the singular nature of its premise, nothing here really screamed sequel. And certainly nothing suggested that the recently announced follow-up would make a genre pivot. But as it turns out, the sequel, entitled Isn't It Scary, will serve as a parody of horror movies. Though we don't yet know whether Wilson or original director Todd Strauss-Schulson will return, screenwriter April Prosser is currently working on the script. Now, given that horror continues to prove itself one of the most reliably popular movie genres, there's sure to be an audience for this wholly unexpected sequel if it can strike the right tone. Number 2, Fall 2 and 3. Even though 2022's vertiginous horror thriller Fall grossed a tasty $21.8 million relative to its $3 million budget, nothing about it suggested the possibility of a sequel. Because, like several other films on this list, it's just not believable for the same outlandish situation to happen to the same person twice. All the same, with Fall's continued success on streaming, a sequel was confirmed to be in development by early 2023, with Fall 3 later revealed to be in the works alongside it. But if you assumed that Fall would operate as an anthology franchise focused on new characters getting caught in high-wire peril, Fall 2 will reportedly bring several characters back, with Grace Caroline Curry expected to reprise her role as original protagonist Becky. Though the first film's Scott Mann will return to write the scripts, the Spierig brothers will direct Fall 2 before Mann comes back to helm Fall 3. Quite how both films will justify bringing Curry back for more dizzy thrills, however, remains to be seen. Number 1. Poultrygeist II, The Henpire Strikes Back. It becomes a little easier to believe that God just might exist when the universe is imminently blessing us with a sequel to Poultrygeist Night of the Chicken Dead. This 2006 black comedy musical horror film from legendary schlock peddlers Troma Entertainment is actually a damn blast. An unapologetically tasteless and disgusting outing in which a fried chicken restaurant built on top of a Native American burial ground spawns zombie chickens. Given Troma's tendency to always move on to the next thing, there wasn't any reason to expect any sort of sequel, even with Poultrygeist being one of the studio's more popular efforts in its near 50-year history. But at the start of this year, Troma confirmed that a sequel is indeed happening. Poultrygeist II, The Henpire Strikes Back. Little else is known about the new film, though director Mercedes the Muse has promised, quote, more guts, more blood, and more poultry. Honestly, say no more. Sold.